Okay, well, we'll get the show on the road. My name is Andy Lister. The co-chair of the AEOIP slash Earth Observation for Land Management Community of Practice is Liz Hoy, and she's in Alaska hosting another meeting. So I think I'm flying solo today, but that shouldn't be a problem. Today we're going to hear from Karin Riley, who's a research ecologist at the U.S. Forest Service's Missoula Fire Science Lab. Karin leads a team that works on vegetation mapping and wildfire risk mapping under different land management and climate scenarios. Um, you are at a webinar, which is part of a monthly webinar series or monthly-ish webinar series um, that is described in these websites that I have up on the screen, and I'm going to share this. And if it doesn't kill me here, copy link. I will paste this into the chat in a moment after I'm done sharing my screen. And in there, you will be able to learn about what the AEOIP is and what the our relationship with the ESIP group is. And with that, yes, there's one more thing. Um, let's see here. So on this Google Doc, which I'm going to share in the chat in a second, the way this is going to go is Karin's going to give her talk. Then we're going to break out into breakout groups, and Aaron, who you just heard from, is going to divide you randomly up to 7 groups, depending upon how many people are on the call. And in those groups, you're going to discuss some discussion questions. So each group has the same questions, and you can see the name here in these tabs in this Google Doc. You don't have to answer the questions, all of them, but we're going to ask you to answer as many as you can and just use these to spark discussion. Then we're going to come back and hopefully have at least 10 minutes to go over as many groups as possible and have a lively discussion. If there are any questions, please put them in the chat and I'll try to monitor that. And with that, I will, Karin, you should be able to share your screen now. And I will put that link to the Google Doc so you can have it open and be thinking about it as she speaks.
All right, is it working? Do you see a screen?
I see the PowerPoint screen. It says TreeMap and
Excellent.
FuelMap, and it looks like appropriate full screen sharing.
That's wonderful. So this is a new group for me, and scrolling through the names, I see some familiar names there. I also see like a lot of Andy listers on here. There are definitely a lot. So if folks want to, in the chat, introduce yourself and say kind of where you're coming from, land manager, researcher, private sector, etc., I'd be really interested in that. And I'm going to talk today about TreeMap and FuelMap dataset. Whoopsie. I'm getting some interesting things in my PowerPoint here that are blocking some things, but hopefully I can see what I need to see. Um, I said yes to Andy's invitation to give this talk before I even knew what that long acronym was. And once I looked it up, I was really excited because I think TreeMap is a really nice way, and I'm sure the real Andy Lister knew this, to really kind of showcase how we're getting directly from those Earth observation satellites into some data sets that go right into the hands of managers. So I think this is a fun use case for this group, hopefully. And Andy, I've tried to cram a lot into this PowerPoint, so if I'm going too long, you're just going to cut me off. I wanted to start with the mission statements. I saw that one for AEOIP, where it's this collaboration between USFS and NASA, and really looking to link those remotely sensed data products right to what land managers are doing in the field. And then ESIP, also that interagency flare with the satellite-based land management as well. So TreeMap, I'll start off talking about TreeMap and how we create it. We'll go through some use cases. Our core mission is to provide that tree level data for the forests of the conterminous US, and that goes to a number of folks in both the public and private sector. This is kind of a daunting flowchart at the moment. It won't look daunting at the end, but I wanted to start with this overview. You can see how at the top, there are really these foundational observational data sets, and that's not only the remotely sensed imagery, but also FIA plot observations and weather observations. And those go through a process to get into TreeMap. From there, I'm going to go through several different pathways of how the data set can be used. And some of these are more entry level, grab a data set off the shelf. Some of these take more expertise and time. So we're hoping to be flexible in how we deliver these. So starting off with what TreeMap is, I know I've seen some of the names out there that are not Andy Lister, and I know some of you are familiar. Others, maybe this is a new data set. What I'm showing you here is what the tree map looks like at that CONUS scale. Any of those pixels in color there are forested pixels that we've modeled in the tree map process. Basically, what we're doing there is we're taking forest plot observations from FIA, from US Forest Service Forest Inventory and Analysis. So these folks are out in the field every summer measuring individual trees. We get a really detailed, high quality data set from that process. For each tree, we know its DBH status, live or dead, species, etc. And so what we're endeavoring to do there is take these really detailed observations at the plots and then impute those across the landscape. So we use random forests for that. And we're looking at gridded landscape data from Landfire and DayMet to give us the predictors for the grids. So I've zoomed in on a little part of the data set at the lower left corner there. That's the Mogollon Rim of Arizona. And each of those unique colors is for a unique FIA plot visit. So that's what that long FIA control number is for. It's for a particular visit. And you can see how those kind of cluster along the elevational and biophysical gradients there. And that's at a 30 by 30 meter resolution. So to go through this process in a little bit more detail, we just talked about that really rich data set we get from FIA. That is assigned, we want to take those really sparse measurements. They're like one per 6,000 acres, one plot per 6,000 acres. And we really would like to have that level of detail everywhere on the landscape seamlessly. So we need two data sets to get this done. One is those plot data sets, the reference data set, and then the second is the less detailed information, but we have it everywhere. That's called the target data. So that's coming from Landfire and DayMet. This is a really simple example of what we're endeavoring to do here. In the end, we get a gridded map of forest plot identifiers. And basically what Random Forest is doing is it's identifying the most similar plots for each pixel. So out of those two plots it left there, the clear winner, because I've made this a really simple example, is plot number 1. So if you're looking at the gridded example on the right, for example, that vegetation group in the center pixel is ponderosa pine. So is the one for plot 1. That's the clear winner. This is what the models look like under the hood. You unfortunately can't see the decision trees when you're working in R, but we build these decision trees on the plot observations. We do about 200, 300, 400 trees per landfire zone. And then when you want to know which is the best match for any pixel, you're going to take the observations from that pixel. They go through the decision trees in R. Okay, so what we're going to do to decide what's the best match here is look in what's called that terminal bucket at the bottom of the decision tree. The only plot in both of those in this example is 12. So that's the clear winner. And that's basically what we're doing, but across many more decision trees than that. So this is just a quick look at our predictor stack to tell you what goes in. To make this process run, you need to have the same variables available in your reference data and also in your target data. So we use location, topography. There's a suite of vegetation variables there that are really important, biophysical variables that come from DMET, and then disturbance variables. So this is where we can look at how that satellite imagery is coming in. Landfire Project creates that forest cover, forest height, and existing vegetation group rasters for us. And part of that process is taking seasonal NDVI and then tasseled cap from Landsat. So now I'm going to start to talk about the first of these pathways for getting to users. And I'm showing it right there, one of the attributes we release with the TreeMap dataset. So not only can you get that grid of forest plot IDs, you can get things like forest type. And here we've zoomed in for a little section of the Willamette National Forest in Oregon. You can see those forest types kind of clustering along those riparian zones and then elevational bands as you're moving up the mountains there. I wanted to talk a little bit about what makes TreeMap different from some of the other data sets that are out there. For example, Big Map or Lima Group. And one of the ways is that we're not modeling a single attribute. And that's my understanding of their process. So if they want to know carbon, that would be modeled separately. If you want to know live or dead trees, that would be modeled from a separate model. So ours is different in the sense that we're assigning an FIA plot identifier to each pixel, and then all the attributes flow right from that plot assignment. Um, this is an area of active research that people have talked about. We should really look at the accuracies you get for various attributes. That way, like maybe it is more accurate if you're modeling them separately, but then are all of them coherent with another if each has a separate model? So that's one thing we know comes from TreeMap is all those attributes will be coherent and make sense with one another since they all come from that plot ID. So going back to this overview that's hopefully making more sense now, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but that gray box is showing those inputs coming right in from the satellite to this process, that seasonal NDVI, and then also these variables that are needed for tasseled cap. We also talked about the first path. If you go down to the very bottom of that diagram, you can see purple TreeMap data set. You go right over to these attribute rasters, for example, forest type, like we just showed. And then there's kind of a brown arrow highlighting the first of those paths down to our end users. And we hear not only from land and fire managers, we'll go through some examples in a minute. A lot of researchers we hear from using it as well. And then private sector, we hear from a lot of private landowners as well using the data set. I want to show a few of the ways that you can use TreeMap. And the first of these is our TreeMap Explorer that was put together by our colleagues at what was formerly known as GTech and is now GEO, a part of Forest Service. If you go into this TreeMap Explorer, and if you Google TreeMap Explorer, you should get right to it. The attribute layers are in there. And I'm again showing forest type here for the Bridger Teton National Forest. If you upload a perimeter there, like that red one that you see, you can do some analysis for that. So if you look at that middle graph, which is admittedly really small, sorry about that, we have summarized the forest type codes for the Bridger Teton. So you can see there aspen if you have your glasses on, white bark pine, lodgepole, etc. Another way to get the data set is from the Forest Service Research Data Archive. It is about a 5 gigabyte data set, and it comes not only with the attribute raster, but a tree table. So there's a record in there for each individual tree, telling you the species, the height, etc. If you're a GIS person, this is maybe the way to go. I'm showing again that map of the imputed plot identifiers here. And you can see along the bottom there in the attribute table, these are some of the attributes that we circulate with the data set. So if you're looking for stand size code, if you're looking for live basal area, number of live trees per acre, volume, biomass, carbon, etc., you don't need to do any more work. You can just download a raster and away you go. We also have the data set now in Google Earth Engine. So if you're a person that uses that platform, you can go there as well. I wanted to give a little nod because we're gonna talk about some carbon risk in a moment, that there's a sister data set to TreeMap 2 that's called FuelMap. We made this for smoke calculations. We started looking at smoke emissions just using TreeMap and pretty quickly realized that's not where the lion's share of the smoke is coming from. That's not coming largely from burning off just the needles and trees and small branches during a fire, but most of the smoke is going to be coming from the litter, duff, coarse and fine woody debris on the forest floor. So luckily FIA measures those on most of their plots. It's starting to be more all of the time. We, to fill in any pixels where those data, the fuels are missing, we run a second imputation. We just use that same variable stack I showed you earlier as in TreeMap, and we're able to backfill those plots. So there's measurements for litter, duff, coarse and fine woody debris everywhere. To get to FuelMap, the one choice right now is that Forest Service Research Data Archive. This is a map of what litter carbon looks like on Blue Mountain, right near my home in Missoula, Montana. So you can see how that varies with the forest type, etc. Okay, so coming back to this diagram for a moment, because I want to show a second pathway. I've turned a second one orange there to show how you can use the tree table. So we're going to take a segue into a derivative of TreeMap called the snag hazard data set. The reason that we put this together is we were in touch with a lot of folks in the incident management community. And if you look at this graph here, you can see U.S. wildland fire responder fatalities over the past decades. There's a trend there in the 80s, 90s, maybe into the 2000s where those are increasing. Obviously, the most dangerous thing for firefighters is going to be driving to the fire, also heart attacks, but snags are right up there. So snags, of course, are dead trees. Those are important habitat. We also hear from ecologists who use this data set, but in that wildland fire environment, snags are not a thing you want a lot of. They're firefighters that are killed and injured every year by falling or fragmentation of the tops or branches falling down. The trees can also be weakened, and then when they're exposed to wind, come down. And this is just a place you don't want to be building fire line. A lot of times they have to fell snags to build fire line, and that's a dangerous process. So we combed through the firefighter records and we found 6 to 8 fire responder deaths caused in that decade by falling snags. So the goal here is reduce exposure to snags and thus prevent injuries and fatalities. So we got together with our colleague, Professor Chris Dunn at OSU. He'd already come up with this nice rubric on the right to classify the snag hazard. So you can see 4 classes there. What Chris came up with as predictors for that is the median height of snags. The taller those snags are, the larger the radius when they fall, so the more dangerous. And then obviously as that density of snags goes up, you also see more hazard. We compared this to a set of FIA plot locations, and we found our within-class accuracy was 86% on that. So we were pretty satisfied, pleasantly surprised, I will say, with that. I'm going to show you an example of this in the incident environment. This is for the Cedar Creek fire of 2022. And here we work with our partners at Risk Management Assistance Program. That's a partnership between managers, fire scientists, analysts, and agency leadership. And the goal here is to deliver decision support to tools, especially for high complexity fires. But there is a dashboard up, that RMA dashboard is up that anyone can ping anytime. I'll show you a little bit more what that looks like in a moment. There's not only the snag hazard data set, but there's a whole suite of analytics. So some of you probably will have heard of suppression difficulty index, which is just like what it sounds. How hard is that fire for firefighters to contain at each pixel? And then potential control lines. So those potential control lines can be mapped out before the fire even comes and show areas that firefighters might be able to have more successful control lines. So on this particular fire, this was in Oregon, you can look and see there are parts of that landscape that are blue, and then there are definitely spots in that higher hazard, the red and orange. So already, if you're an incident management team, you're coming to this fire, you might be traveling across the country, you've maybe never been to this area. You can look at these analytics to start giving you an idea of strategic planning and how to avoid hazard. This is a little peek at that RMA dashboard. I took this screen capture on Friday, so that's showing active fires, and then the pink areas are areas that had a red flag warning, so areas that are probably going to be windy and dry. All right, so that snag hazard was my example of just classifying the tree table. So we're going to move over into the super advanced settings now and talk about simulations. So in the simulation world, you can simulate fuel treatment or fire. And hopefully, if I don't talk too long, we'll get to look at both. Okay, so 2 examples I hope to get to are wildfire risk to carbon, and then also looking at change in fire risk due to fuel treatment. Over on the right there, I did a little screen capture from another website we have up that's called our Wildfire Risk to Carbon website. We're going to tour that a little bit in a moment. That's showing the expected annual carbon loss from standing live and dead trees for a part of California. We're going to take a whirlwind tour through this wildfire risk framework that we often use at the Fire Lab. There's 3 components to this framework. One is the likelihood or probability of burning. A second is the intensity or the flame length of the fire. And the third is the susceptibility of the resource or the effect of fire on various highly valued resources. So if you're a risk framework person, this is not the IPCC framework. This is a straight up actuarial risk framework. So very similar to what an insurance company is going to use when they're looking at setting premiums for your home. That likelihood leg we get from a program called FSIM, or the Large Fire Simulator. This is written by Mark Finney at the Fire Lab. If you're familiar with the quantitative wildfire risk assessments that are out there, this is exactly the same methodology. So this map is from our team's fire simulations at continental scale and showing those blue areas, lower probability of burning, and higher probability as you get into those orange and red classes. We're also able to get predicted fire intensity from FSIM. We get a whole stack of intensities here. I've just shown them to you for one predicted fire, but we get a whole stack of intensities. And so we're able to divvy those up into probabilities of those 6 flame lengths classes. So we can know the likelihood of something being a surface fire, that 0 to 2 foot flame length, moving all the way up into that 12 plus flame length that's probably going to be crown fires. The third leg of that triangle is the susceptibility leg. So here you've already seen this image of TreeMap, and we're going to talk just a little bit about the simulations we do to get at susceptibility. So we're moving from this no fire scenario so we tend to use forest vegetation simulator, the fire and fuels extension. So this is looking at one FIA plot. There's the no fire example is at the top. And as you move down through these different flame lengths, you can see that there's more dead trees moving in. So lots of those green trees are turning gray till we're almost complete mortality at those higher flame lengths. Well, let's see. PowerPoint did not want to advance, but I've won. Okay, so to look at this summary, there's baseline carbon that you get from TreeMap and FuelMap, and we're zoomed in here to an area right around the fire lab in Missoula. So you can see how that live carbon varies across the landscape. Then there's the likelihood or the burn probability from FSIM, also variable across the landscape. We'd also bring in the intensities. And then I showed at bottom right there that susceptibility function. This is what we call a response function. So the amount of carbon emitted at different flame lengths. Obviously, that's increasing as the flame length does. So for those of you who like to see the equation, here it is, and I'll run quickly through this. This is for expected emissions, which is the same thing really as saying mean annual emissions. So obviously there's a probability of fire of different flame lengths here, and then variable amount of carbon across the landscape. So this is that actuarial risk calculation. It sums across the probability of each of those 6 different flame length categories and also the no fire category. And then that RF is that response function. So that's the amount of carbon predicted to be emitted in a fire of each intensity. So you can stop there and have the equation feedback something to you for 1 pixel, or you can sum across an area. And that's what I've done there. I've gone into our wildfire risk to carbon viewer. I've drawn a little polygon. That's that little red dotted line. And you can push the analysis tab in there to summarize that. And it looks like for this particular area, it's predicting on average 3,357 tons of emissions for that area. This is a quick tour of the Wildfire Risk to Carbon website. If you're familiar with wildfire risk to communities, this looks exactly like their website, or I shouldn't say exactly like, obviously the visuals are different, but the tabs and everything are going to look familiar. So if you click understand, you will see a summary of the likelihood risk framework I just talked about. If you go to the Explore tab, which we'll look at that a little bit more in a moment, there's a number of data sets up there. And then if you're interested in building resilience in your forests, that Build Resilience tab has some information about that. Okay, so this is what that Explore tab looks like in the Wildfire Risk to Carbon viewer. We're looking here at total carbon emissions for the greater than 12-foot flame length category. There's a bunch of flavors of different data in here. I hope this is really fun to play with if people are getting in there and playing. First of all, I'll talk about forest carbon. So that's live and dead trees. That's also that litter, daph, coarse, and fine woody debris. And so what we've served in here, you see an example at the right, that conditional carbon emissions at the 6 different flame lengths, and then carbon remaining after fire of the 6 different flame lengths. Then you can also get those expected annual forest carbon emissions. Again, same thing as your mean annual carbon emissions. And then the last data set that I think is the hardest to wrap your head around is the expected annual forest carbon remaining after fire. So that's the amount of carbon expected to be on site given that there's a probability of fire. We serve that in a little different flavor if you're a private carbon market person in the forest offset market. We know that folks are primarily interested in the pools they call IFM1 and IFM3. So that's above ground and below ground live trees, above ground and below ground dead trees. And there's the same flavor of data sets for that type of carbon. There's also a brand spanking new data set I don't even have time to talk about today that was led by our collaborator, Scott Zimmer, for rangeland carbon and the emissions from fire for that. And then to give you fun overlaying things, we also put in that FSIM burn probability and flame length probability for the current time period. And then there is one projected that our team did also for mid-century. All right, so we looked at that third pathway that was using simulations. I'm going to do a little time check, Andy, and see where we're at. Okay, we'll make this one super quick.
You're doing fine. I mean, this is such great material. If we have to cut the breakouts, shorter, I think that it would be okay. So don't feel like you have to rush, and it would be good to have some time at the end. But don't worry.
All right, thanks, Andy. I'm guilty sometimes of once I start talking, I start having a lot of fun. So I'm in, that's good to do a little time check. This is pathway number 4. So this is a study that's about 10 years old now, but we have dusted it off a little bit because there's analyses that we didn't publish in this first paper. So we're working on some new things from this set of simulations. But the idea here was to look at changes in burn probability and flame length in the Sierra National Forest in California due to fuel treatment. And so again, we're using FVS here. We simulated a thin from below prescription combined with prescribed fire. The idea is to try to reduce that surface fire behavior and the crown fire potential. So one of the interesting things right off the bat, we looked at identifying which pixels could be treated with mechanical fuel treatment. So right away, you have to take off the table wilderness and any area that is roadless and is too remote because it's just too hard to access with the equipment that's needed. So once we applied a screen that was from Malcolm North et al., and this was actually his most liberal screen, so the most pixels remaining, we looked within 610 meters of existing roads and on slopes less than 35%, and then 305 meters on slopes greater than 50%. And we removed some of the pixels that have really expensive treatments that really wouldn't have changed the forest structure much. So if you had something that was, 37% cover and you want to go down to 35% cover, that's not going to give you too much benefit. So right away, what we found is only 8% of the landscape had pixels that were available for treatment. And that's pretty, I think, illustrative right now as we're really looking to up our fuel treatment across the landscape. We used potential operational delineations or pods to select for treatment at 4 different budget levels. So this is basically a 10, 20, 30, and $40 million budget. We wanted to see how much we could optimize treatments across those 4 different levels. And if we selected one of those pods, they're outlined in pink there on the right. If we selected one for treatment, then that means all of the eligible pixels inside of that pod were treated. So just a really quick tour of some of the outputs. There's a lot more in there than this. The top left, I'm showing the annual burn probability from the baseline run. So you're seeing a lot of red and orange there. Then you see those 2 pods in the center that were selected for treatment and which were the treatable pixels. And then when you look on the top right, you can see that burn probabilities come down, moving out of those red classes into the oranges and yellows. A little different way to look at this is on the bottom. I'm showing basically the same thing at that lower left, but looking at the percent reduction in burn probability. So those blue colors are showing a decrease. What we found is fuel treatments reduce burn probability an average of 48 to 60% on the site of the treatment, depending on the budget level. And that's because fires, they had a lower rate of spread moving through the treatment. That made them easier to contain, and then there were smaller fires. So we're in model land here, but we think a lot of those would be real effects in the real world. You can also see if you look at those lower 2 panels that there was a large reduction in high flame length probability. There were some pixels that had an increase in low flame length probability, which at first was a head scratcher, but we realized that these were fires that were moving through at high flame length that, after the treatment now, those are going to be a low flame length fire. So they actually moved categories. One of the things we're working on publishing right now, because this really keeps coming up in today's world, is that we saw this effect, this reduction in burn probability and high flame length decrease with distance from the treatment pretty rapidly. So as you're moving away from that treatment edge, you can still see effects at 250, 500 meters, even 1 kilometer. But by the time you get to 2 kilometers, you don't see much effect. So I thought the take home here really was that if you're looking to have an effect on highly valued resources and protect those, you want to be treating on their site or close to them, according to this set of simulations. All right, that was our last pathway. I think we did it. It was fun to put together this talk because I hadn't thought about this prior to this talk, that there's a lot of different pathways for getting information to users here. And that I'm hoping, and maybe this will come out in the breakout rooms, that this gives people the tools that they need to use the data set. Whether you just want to grab that attribute raster, you don't have a lot of time, but you see the attribute you want, or whether you're a person that's really looking to do some particular simulations in FVS or something similar. Um, and it really made me reflect how TreeMap is powered by these foundational observations, whether it's from a satellite field inventory plot or weather observations. We can't make this type of data set without those. And we're, of course, living in a time where the utility of science is often questioned. We hear that a lot. And this was a fun talk to put together in the sense that I think we can trace the outcomes here of federally funded science directly from those satellites, the Earth observation satellites, through the labor that those of us are doing at the Forest Service and with our partners to create these data sets, and then right over to the uses in the field, whether that's avoidance of risk for wildland firefighters. We know a lot of people in the forest offset carbon markets are using the data set also for quantification. And then we hear from land managers saying they need to meet NEPA requirements for carbon, also that they don't have staffing for timber cruises, etc. So I'm not sure if we have questions or if we're headed for the breakout room, but I'll put this slide up here. And I really wanted to put the names of collaborators up here because there's no way this work can be done without a huge team, whether it's Mark Finney writing the FSIM model or John Shaw providing us with FIA knowledge, Isaac Grenfell, our statistician. We have a lot of real workhorse analysts, Rachel Hauptman, Scott Zimmer, Lila Leatherman, and more. We need all of these people to get this done. So a shout out and a thanks to all of them. End of report.
Very, very impressive. Boy, this is wonderful. Um, we have 25 minutes. Here's my proposal. We take 10 minutes now, or 10, let's say 12 minutes. I just put a link in the chat. And when you go there, you'll see on the first page, it has several, pertinent websites you might click around just to store for your own knowledge. And then there are 7 breakout groups. Each of you will be shunted into one breakout group, and I think it should say like group 1, group 2, etc. You will find in there in the tabs associated with your group questions, and you could use those questions as discussion topics, but don't worry about having it all organized. It would be great if one person in each group can choose to be the note taker. It's not a big deal. We're a pretty informal group here. It's supposed to be fun. And we will regroup in 12 minutes, which would be 49, 2:49 Eastern. Let's just say 2:50, and then we'll have 10 minutes to kind of sift through what we've got in the comments and get a chance to ask some specific questions. And then Karin will have a chance to look over what we wrote and if you put your email in there, she will reach out to you, I assume, Karin, well, to answer any questions we don't get a chance to get to. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, so let's give it a try. So Aaron, um, I guess they'll get shunted over and then they'll just come back automatically to the main room. Is that how it works?
Yep, I will start the breakout rooms and then in 12 minutes, pull them back.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
It's not. I mean, we could talk about this all day. It's just an amazing job, and Karen, if you get called away for emergency duty, we, we totally understand.
I'm gonna
You'll be able to
go,
respond.
I'm gonna go check on things and I'll
Yeah,
be a
now's the
few
time. Yeah.
minutes.
All right, I'm gonna create those rooms right now, and people will be shifted over. So here we go.
Breakout room 4. Join.
think Andy Lister is muted.
Oh, looks like Andy Hudak, this another Andy is keeping
Well, it
watch.
was
That's
fun
good.
posing as you for a while, but then I decided to turn
Doing
my
horrible
camera on
things.
and come
Yeah.
clean.
So we have about 10 minutes. So here's what I think we should do. Let's if you have really hot button questions, you're dying to know something very specific, while you can verbally make sure you get it out of Karin, put it in the chat. Otherwise, we'll just go through the breakout rooms, and you don't have to share your screen. But does anyone from room one want to just give a real quick summary of what it is you guys talked about? Okay. Oh,
I
go
can
ahead.
talk. I thought Andy
Yeah,
was
yeah.
going to talk because he was on screen.
Oh, were we in room 1? Why did I think we were in room 7? Okay,
I thought we
sorry.
were in. I thought we were in room 1.
Oh,
Well, I tell
Yeah,
you
my
what,
bad.
go
we
for
were
it.
in room
You
one,
guys
Andy.
have the stage, and we'll go back to 1 or 7.
Well, I'll just continue talking since I already am. We talked a lot about the appropriate scale um, for using the data, whether it's more nationally oriented or whether it is something that can be used at like the NEPA project level or maybe a forest plan revision level. We were also interested in what sorts of validation efforts have been done to actually answer some of those same questions about scale. Um, and then finally, a question about the temporal refresh rate as well.
Hmm. So Karin, is Karin still on?
I am here.
I put them in the chat there. Those were what the questions that were in group one's questions. They all seem good to me. So
Yeah. Okay, so there's a few more, it looks like, than what was just verbally said too. So I feel like that scale question is a really interesting one. We're usually advising not the pixel scale. We usually say something a little bit hand wavy, like the project scale. I can't give you an exact acreage for that. We think it's good at. But I think we do need, this is a question we need to keep asking. The scale, I feel like for TreeMap, if you go into the publications, that is the best place right now to see the validation that's been done. And we do some amount of overlaying FIA plots with the data set. So you can find that there's pretty good accuracies, like within class accuracies for cover and height and veg group. I don't remember those exactly right now. Rachel can pop on if she does. One of the challenges here, and this is something we're looking at maybe getting some STEM maps for our next validation effort. This has been an active discussion with Andy Hudak too, as we've been doing some work around validation, is that this is challenging because if you want to use an FIA plot for it, you're probably only at maximum having something like 10-20% of the pixel area is covered by that plot. So you're trying to characterize that pixel with this small amount of the plot. So even, overlaying that with the data set, you can't really conclude that's the perfect tool for validation. So that's something we continue to look at, and just starting to shake the best bushes to get some STEM maps for that for future efforts. I'm going to see if I can quickly hit some of these because I know we have other groups. The temporal refresh rate, right now we're finishing the 2023, so that gives you an idea of what it has been. It's just come up for me last week in some other discussions that people really need the current data set. So we're going to try to up that to where anytime, this is the goal. I'm not sure if we're quite there yet. Anytime a new land fire data set comes out, that we can run the imputation pretty quickly. So that would be the goal. Are there any other burning ones there? Should we let other groups go and we can come back if we
sure.
have time?
Group 2, does anyone in group 2 want to shout out their question or paste it in the chat?
think I was group 2. We were just talking about ground validation and all of that, but I was lucky enough to get in the group someone who works with Karin, so she was able to answer some of my questions for me. But so I don't think there's anything, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Group
I just
three.
had to
Oh,
go
sorry.
back that I forgot to say is that we feel like that FuelMap data set, if you're using that, that is probably only suitable for use at a kind of larger scale than TreeMap. And that's partly because of the way fuels are measured. It's really hard to characterize all the fuels on the plot with a transect. And so that can lead to a little bit of, there's wider error bars on that one. So I think that one you need to be a slightly larger scale than TreeMap.
Mm-hmm. Group three. Anything?
I can go ahead.
Four. Oh, go ahead.
I can go ahead and chime in for group 3. I will say that there is a fair amount in the document, but just to summarize, we had some questions regarding accuracy presented by the group. So in one case, curiosity about, or just speaking towards how modeling dead and downed fuels or accumulated fuels is very difficult. And so just curious about the inputs for that, since it typically requires fine details. We discussed how this data set could be useful for the smoke modeling program. Then also questions regarding, I think this was mentioned already before, but in terms of plot attributes being applied at the pixel level, if there's methods integrated for the fact that plots are discrete. And so like integrating to model like continuous variables, like how that might be addressed. And then otherwise, for use cases, we had a member of the group describe how they are curious about how to grow trees post-fire, so related to hydrologic recovery. And so they're looking to predict evapotranspiration by tree species. And so they're currently using the RAP database, and they're curious as to if these products can be coupled. So there's more in there, but that was kind of a high-level summary.
There's more there than we can get to today. We need another hour.
I know. Well, we can have you back.
The RAP platform, interestingly, I know that Scott has been using that for his range map. And then we're moving over actually into BLM aim plots for that imputation for the rangeland. So I don't know if that speaks to that question at all.
Great, thank you. Hopefully the team member heard that, or the group member.
Okay. Again, we've got these captured in the document. I'm sure Karin and her group will sort of go over these and try to, especially if you give some contact info, she'll reach out. Maybe we have time for one more question. We'll give group 4 a chance. Does anyone in there want to get your last word in? Or does anyone want to just shout out from any of the remaining
Andy,
groups?
this is Kevin McGowan. I think we were at group
Oh
4.
boy, it's Kevin.
Yeah, hey, good to see you, Andy. Quick comment is, the scale question is really relevant, very appropriate, and so interesting. And Donna Shorak and I talked a little bit about the scale applied, who's using it in the region, well, whatever region that is. And we talked a little bit about how the data might be used to bring and carry forward some of the NVC. As we think about mid-level data or whatever classification schema we're using, where on a hierarchy, NVC hierarchy, might some of those classes start carrying forward, and as people start thinking about if that's going to be something that can be done. We've commented on Big Map a little bit, and different uses, different areas of use, maybe not scale, but different areas that one might consider, and different ways that one might consider looking at boundaries of bird habitat or watersheds, etc. Cool.
Well, that's great. And we could talk about this all day, but thank you all for attending. And please, like I said, reach out to Karin and sign up for our seminar series. We're going to try to have one of these every month, the best we can. And hopefully they'll be on Tuesdays from now on, according to the original schedule. And Karin, thank you very much. Wonderful presentation, as usual. It's kind of what I expected. So you've met the expectation. Thank you so much. And thank you all for attending.
I
Have a great
appreciate
rest
the
of your day.
invitation.
Oh,
Thanks.
it was great. Take care, everyone.